Good afternoon, and welcome to continued Native American Heritage Month programming at Metropolitan Community College. I so appreciate the time that you all are taking to join us. Today, my hope is that the meaning of the Thanksgiving holiday will grow deeper for all of our viewers. We are also very thankful to our speaker who is allowing this presentation to be recorded. You may want to return to watch it again, or you might know someone who couldn't be here today. You can check back to mccneb.edu/native for a recording link in about 2 weeks, or you can also check the MCC YouTube page. So several of you have been with us in previous days where I read a part of the White House's proclamation for Native American Heritage Month. I'm not going to read that all again, but I would like to encourage you to look it up. If you Google White House Proclamation Native American Heritage Month 2023, you will see the deep thought and consideration that was developed in that proclamation. It speaks to the United States not always seeing natives as part of the nation, but as a threat to it, and the violence and devastation that occurred due to these beliefs and perspectives. It also reminds us of, in spite of those centuries of violence and oppression, Native American peoples are and continue to be resilient. They are an essential fabric of the United States. And especially I wanted to note, since Veterans Day was celebrated at Metropolitan Community College today and is officially on November 11th, that Native Americans serve in the United States Armed Forces at higher rates than any other ethnic group. They continue to steward many great lands, and they have contributed to science, humanities, arts, public service, and help to bring prosperity to all of us. Today, we are honored to have Larry Spotted Crow Mann with us. He is a multi-talented Indigenous artist with a career that spans over 3 decades. In 2021, Mann was the first recipient of the Indigenous Peoples Award from the NAACP in Massachusetts for his lifetime commitment to social justice and sharing the culture and music of his tribe. Educating, sharing, and being a voice for social change has been at the heart of his journey. His work and passion have been fueled by many of the painful experiences he has endured growing up as a Native child in an urban environment, which, by the way, is a situation for many Native children in the Omaha area. Interwoven in this story is how he overcame addiction at the age of 21. Many of his early teachings come from his grandfather, who helped him on the path to healing. Mann's music, traditional stories, and books are always accompanied by important history and the living presence of Indigenous people today. Larry Spotted Crow Mann is a nationally acclaimed author and award-winning writer, poet, cultural educator, traditional storyteller, and tribal musician, centered around the intersection of cultural and environmental awareness, spirituality, and youth sobriety in the Indigenous community. In 2021, he became the first Native American person to perform the opening honor song for the Boston Marathon. He is the author of 3 books, including Drumming and Dreaming, The Mourning Road to Thanksgiving, which was the 2015 Native American Wordcraft Circle of Honors winner, and the internationally acclaimed Tales from the Whispering Basket. 2 of his books, Drumming and Dreaming, a spectacular collection of stories of Nipmuc legends, and Circle Tied to Mother Earth, are featured in a statewide curriculum across Massachusetts as part of a life skills training for teachers and students focused on alcohol and drug prevention for Native American teens. Today, Larry will share with you about his role as co-director and founder of the Okiteo Cultural Center, an organization that allows for the opportunity for interdisciplinary education through cultural workshops, dance, music, and art. Previously, Mann served as a board member of the Nipmuc Cultural Preservation, an organization set up to promote the cultural, social, and spiritual needs of Nipmuc people, as well as an educational resource of Native American studies. He also serves as a review committee member for the Native American Poets Project at the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University. Thank you for listening to that long but such a rich bio, and please welcome Mr. Larry Spotted Crow Mann, presenting the Mourning Road to Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Cotabato Metropolitan Community College, for having me. It is truly an honor to share this space with you all today. I'm speaking to you today from the Okiteo Cultural Center here in Ashfield. It's just on the borderland of Nipmuc homeland, and we are on the borderlands of the Pecumtuck and the Stockbridge Munsee tribal peoples. And it's about 32 degrees, it's cloudy out. The birds are still out. It's a little sleet coming down, and every now and then some of the geese are heading south. And very quiet up here. You know, we're, as we say, kind of in the bush. You know, so it's a real pleasure to be with you all here today. And I want to acknowledge the space, sharing the space with you all of the tribal nations of Nebraska, in the area there. I want to acknowledge them. I know there are many, and I do not know them all. And so I want to just say I am thinking of them and appreciate them for continuing on in their culture, in their traditions, and making themselves known through all their hard work to maintain an identity that was summarily taken away from us as a people. And so I wanted to open up and share that. And also, so we're going to be talking about quite a few things, and I always wish I had more time. And essentially, the Mourning Road to Thanksgiving, that's kind of the main topic, as it were. But also, as I had the talk with Barbara in our pre-meetings, and here being we're on the Northeast coast, and I'll get to that. I have some slides to share. And the tribes here, you know, we're all, you know, when we say indigenous people, we say cultures, right, with an S. So we all have various cultures and different ways of doing things in our specific homelands. And so I think, especially for folks being so far away, it's important to lay the groundwork to talk about our communities here and what we've gone through in terms of being here on the Atlantic coast, coastal people. And I think that's been the premise of my work and all the different things that I've experienced that's inspired me for all those years. And and thinking of a way to streamline my bio as well. And so, yeah, this has essentially been my life's work, sharing. And so in honor of this land, I want to firstly, in our traditional open, we say our words in our language. And as we say in the Nipmuc Algonquin words, we say in our opening blessing, say, "Wu nasha natumo manatu, tabatni, watu chikinisin, okumis, tabatni wuchi sapausu, wasukete huanak, notas ninwa manantiank, king nuta yu pantaminuk, and the male ninwa me quantam kichia, ka mata wanantam, ka nagutie kokutam ninwa, manatu, wasukete huanak, womanetio, ka nosokomuso amoke, nino cancanto chokesich. Niayo, I greet you in the words in the Nipmuc language, the words of peace and reciprocity. And I ask that we would share, and I always laugh when I say this part, it's in the language, it's say we are asking to share our breath together, but in the Algonquin translation, breath means spirit, because the spirit is our life force, our breath is our life force. And so the literal sense of that work that our body does, breathing, right, it's our spirit. And I tell folks, if you try holding your breath for a little while, you'll see what I mean. It is your life force. And so we're using our life force to talk. We're sharing our spirit. And so this is what we talk about in those words there, and also inviting our ancestors into this space to share with us in this important time, and welcoming that. And also, I would like to always open up with a Nipmuc healing song. And I know, unfortunately, on Zoom, it doesn't have the same resonance, but I would ask that you would please listen. Oh, Manado, ni skeueo, ni nawan, wo Jessica niyan. Ga eyu te eyo, pa yu te yo, akwani enenawan. Nina one P and damn, Nina one P and damn. Hey yo, hey yo, hey ya. Way yo, hey yo, hey ya. Way ha, hey ha. Ya, ra, 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 ra. Oh. Manado, ni skeueo, ni nawan, wo Jessica niyan. Ka eyo te eyo, pa yo te yo, akwani ene nawan. Nina one piandam, Nina one piandam, way yo hey yo hey ya, way yo hey yo hey ya, way ha hey ha. All right. Kutabaramish. That's thank you very much in Nipmuc. Thank you all. So then, once again, I truly grateful that we here we are in Native American Awareness Month, and we are still intended on having them talk about Indigenous people year round because there is a wealth of Indigenous epistemology, knowledge that must be shared, and not just by scholars and so on, but Indigenous scholars, artists, writers, filmmakers, youth, and on it goes. And a month is just not enough time to kind of take in and really kind of acquaint folks with the rich history and things that we have to share. And I maybe this is even part of the problem focusing on 1 month because uh we want to compartmentalize indigeneity and we really can't because we are the fabric of society, as Barbara mentioned. And even when you think about the military, we're the highest enlisted, and that's a big part of my story as well. With over 60 relatives who were in the Union Army during the Civil War, two grandfathers in the Revolutionary War, and on it goes. And being a veteran myself, but and as I said, there's so much to talk about. So, but what I want to do is I'm going to share a few slides. I'm going to just talk a little bit about myself and my background, how I got here, and then I want to get into the book a little bit, and then go into some questions. And so and put all these pieces together, as it were, because I think it's always important to set the groundwork about my work and how I got here. And the Mourning Road to Thanksgiving is a big piece of that, how I came to do this and decided to what I created and so on. So let's see here. So I have several of these PowerPoint presentations, so I will be skipping to some of this because I do want to focus on the book as well. And so this is just talking a little bit about the tribes here of Southern New England, again, a colonial term, New England itself. And so when we begin to dismantle the colonial mindset, it takes on a whole work of itself. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is just basically my life's work. As Barbara mentioned, I've been doing this work all my adult life, and sharing the culture and traditions of Nipmuc people here. Nipmuc means people of the water, people of people of the fresh water, and I've really been fortunate enough, and as was mentioned, I overcome addiction at a very young age. Also becoming addicted at a young age because of all the different things that we go through in our communities. And so I was very fortunate, and I tell that story a lot about that. And that's a whole nother story, how I got on this path and at such a young age, very fortunate indeed, at 21 years old. And from that moment on, I dedicated my life to trying to unravel not only what happened to me, but what happened to indigenous people. And why are we in this post-apocalyptic world where we're still on the precipice of people really understanding of who we are, you know? And so I set out to do this work. And so what you're looking at here are some photos of my travels and sharing. The top photo there in the corner with the young girl, that was when I spent some time in Greenland with the Inuit people there. It was just a really marvelous time. And then some of the other photos there of me at some local libraries and the tribal member there where I think we were putting drums together. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you told me before I got through the whole presentation. You guys are so kind. Nobody wanted to let me know they couldn't see. All right. So as I was saying, this is some photos here. Um, some time I spent in Greenland, and then the pictures to the bottom of that one are some tribal folks. We were making some drums, and then on the other side there, that was when I had the wonderful experience at the Forest County Potawatomi community there, doing some work with the tribal youth there, and then doing what I do, what I love most to do, storytelling with youth of all walks of life. So, and then here are some other photos of my work, of my travels. The top picture, that's when I was in Skellefteå, Sweden, doing some work there at the Storytelling Festival. And then below that is Itabaki, Iceland. And then the other photo is when I was in the University of Cuenca, a very moving experience there with the tribal elders from the Amazon. Um, and then the other photo there with my book, Drumming and Dreaming. That was quite the adventure. Every one of these photos, by the way, is an adventure in itself. The larger photo there, that was the National Library of Havana, Cuba. And so I went there on a mission to Cuba to share some of my writings with the community. And that was quite a journey because it was the government runs the country. It's a socialist country. And I'm sure many of you folks know that. And so what's read is censored. So they screened my books, and it was a scary moment to bring them there. They took me into a room, and I didn't bring the Morning Road to Thanksgiving specifically because I think it's other countries may be considered politically charged, and I was concerned about bringing that there, and it probably wouldn't have got through anyway because of that. I think it's on the banned books in different places, especially in red states. I wanted to bring Drumming and Dream, which focused on our tribal legends, and even that, it gave me a scare. But I was really honored to be able to go to Cuba and bring that writing there, and to spend time with the people. There's an unspeakable poverty there, and the oppression there is very palpable. You could see it. I felt it. Scared me, especially there because I wasn't as a tourist there. I wasn't as like the tourists who are in these white spaces. I was there with the people, and quite the experience, I would say. And so here we go. Nipmuc homeland, people of the fresh water. As I mentioned, there's our homeland there. And right up where you see where it says Pecumtuck and the letter T, I'm coming to you from right about that area right now. And as you see, the Nipmuc homeland was over a very large space covering essentially excuse me, 4 states. And after colonization and usurping of lands, our land was down to 5 acres. From a homeland that was larger, just a portion of Massachusetts alone was larger than the island of Puerto Rico. And then you add in northern Rhode Island, northeastern Connecticut, and then the tip of southern New Hampshire. We had essentially the largest tribal homeland in all of southern New England. And so, and we were stripped down to 5 acres of which we still have as our reservation. And since then, some land has been returned, but that 5 acres is called the Hassanimisco Reservation. That's my band of people, Hassanimisco Nipmuc. And that is the only land in the state of Massachusetts that has never been taken by the government, state, federal, or otherwise. If you look at the Mashpee, Wampanoag, Aquinnah, the other two federally recognized tribes here in the state, their lands were seized and then they had their returned lands. However, the Grafton Reserve is the only piece of land. I don't know, maybe even in all of this eastern seaboard here, that land that was never taken. We were able to hold on to that, and because of that, we were able to maintain so much of who we are and really bring out who we are through that. And so that was, again, that's another very intense topic to speak on. And we are not going to talk about this, but I mean, we know that by the 1900s, there were only about 250,000 indigenous people. As states were added, our people were being, ethnically cleansed, put on reservations, removed. And here in Massachusetts, through the Enfranchisement Act, our land was taken and we were detribalized as well. And when I talk about this hard stuff, I always put this little guy up as a reminder. That's my youngest son, Kiteo, who actually now I have another book that I've written about him called The Adventures of Kiteo. And my kids have come in handy for my artwork and writings. Okay. And so when we talk about what happened to indigenous people, for the native folks in the room who are very familiar with this, is what this photo represents, which is indigenous boarding schools. This was from the Carlisle. And so when we want to ask the question, what happened to our people, we were put into these militarized, Christianized camps of removing our language, our identity, our culture, and, summarily tortured to change that, to take that away from us. And when I tell these stories, I tell folks when I'm talking to an audience that when an indigenous person is sharing about the residential school or the boarding school experience, they are never an abstract story. Every living indigenous person has a story of trauma that either they know about or don't know about. But if they're a survivor today, there is a legacy of that in their family. And I share these documents here to show folks that when I talk about these things, they're not an abstract notion of some history book that, some professors talking about the Indians did this or this happened. So this is my family here. And as I mentioned, as we're coming up on Veterans Day, Samuel Vickers was excuse me, coffees, burps. My great-great-grandfather, who was Union Army Civil War veteran, and he's also there with his son. So my great-great times two grandfather, along with many cousins and uncles. And so during that time, Native peoples were still being moved around to reservations. We didn't have freedom. We were wards of the state in the 1860s. But when the war broke out, we thought, well, if this is going to be freedom for African Americans, this is going to be good for us too. So we signed up. Many of us went to this war. But what happened was that indigenous people didn't get anything from that. They didn't get freedom. In fact, they lost more land. And many who died in the field of battle here had their land seized because women couldn't own land. The wives, the mothers, my grandmother, she couldn't own land, so they took the land and they took the children. And what you're looking at here is records of the children being taken and the land being taken from my grandfather and grandmother, 1867 all the way into 1901, where these children were taken and put into these boarding schools or put into these white homes to work out here. During that time, there was a lot of farmland. So a lot of kids didn't make it to boarding schools as well. They were just taken to be servants in white households, and they had to work from the age of 5 to 18. And so this is what was also happening out here. And this is just some background about, as I mentioned, some of the things that were happening in his youth when he was as a teenager, Trail of Tears, Oregon Trail, California Gold Rush, all the horrible things that were happening to indigenous folks. And I wrote a play about that entitled Freedom in Season, about my grandfather, and that's some of the work there. And I share this with folks. The Aboriginal leader from Canada, Georgia Rass, once said, where common memory is lacking, where people do not share the same past, there can be no real community. Where community is to be formed, common memory must be created. Now, if you just look at this, you can see that we do not have a common memory in America. There's a myth of America, and you can see the list there, and the shared lived experience, myth, discovered lands, God-chosen people, freedom, opportunity, exceptionalism, promised lands. And now, on the other hand, you have people with a shared experience of genocide, stolen lands, enslavement, forced removals, mascots, institutionalized racism, Jim Crow, and on it goes. And so this is what has inspired my work my entire life, trying to dismantle this and make sense of all of this. And one of the things let's see here. All right, slides are slowing down here. One of the things I talk about when I look at this is that how do we come to terms with this? Because just looking at this on its face would bring about a lot of hurt, a lot of trauma, and a lot of I guess I'll use the word anger it's fitting. So, but what do we do with that? How does that get us to a better place? And that's what I intended on with my work. This is a picture of my great grandmother, Lucy Vickers. She died a month before I was born. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to meet her. And that article you're looking at to the right of her is some documents that was recorded from her uncle, my great uncle, who was, as lack of a better term, an indigenous medicine person. And that area, the northern part of Nipmuc homeland, back in the early and middle 1800s, it was still very rural. Even today, it still is. And so, however, there were still some white families who would move out to this general area. And so what happened was they were out here on their own. They didn't really have access to doctors and things like that. So there was a little there was this family here, and there was a young white girl who became very ill. And my great uncle, who was a medicine person, cured her of this illness. And he recorded that story of how he helped her. And it was documented in 1936. And it's incidentally, it's under Indian folklore, but it was actually indigenous medicine that, it gets classified as folklore, or our tribal legends are called mythology and so on. But, Christianity and other religions are to be taken literally and so on. So it's important to reflect on how the survival of this culture. And also, as I mentioned, we're thinking about how do we get to a better place. And again, as Barbara mentioned, this is the Okiteo Cultural Center. Some of the work that we're doing here today, it is a place-based learning. We're doing youth outreach, public programming, workshops, environmental awareness, academia. You can come here and do things from STEM to brain tanning hides. So we're really proud of the work that we're doing here. It is truly a blessing for the things that we're doing. And I encourage everybody to go to our website and see the various works that we're doing. And so, matter of fact, what I want to do right now is share one of the videos that I posted. Let's see.
We encounter the uncharted expressions of our beings when we lean into our own story, our own coherent participation of each moment, of each particular image of our life. We observe our colorful reflections as they dance across each ripple and wave that take shape within our creative expressions, wherever that may lead us. There is a living, breathing friction in us all. It ignites that fire, that light. It mingles with the stars above and shines down across our waters. It is like a flowing tapestry, delicately woven in a child's footprint in the sparkling sand, kissed by the moonlit glow. And if I showed you this in a photograph, would you understand? Would you vivify the salt-scented winds that caress my flesh, and the parade of waves that gently greet my toes? Will you hear the drumbeat of my ancestors and see their council fires reflecting off our sacred lakes once again? Would you recognize the laughter of our children, sharing jokes in their language, while having a meal, succotash, and smoked fish? Can you see in that picture the salmon and sturgeon running strong in our rivers, in their homes amongst the people of the water? For the water holds the memory of our villages, our songs, our dances, our story. It is a picture still visible when you see me. This picture is my land. This picture is me.
Stop being shy.
I'm not being shy.
I think you are, because we haven't seen each other in a long time, and it's like, the cat got your tongue.
All right. Thank you for watching that. So that is some of the work that we've done here at Okiteo. And that is a documentary that we filmed about my son. That's one of my sons. And he's actually the boy on the cover of the Mourning Road to Thanksgiving. And so so this all ties in together. So what's interesting about that documentary, and so this is when he was 10 years old, and we were singing in Montreal. And this photographer, she was just starting out, she's from France visiting, and she took this iconic photo of him and a few other ones, the one he was holding in the documentary there. And that picture of him, maybe some of you have seen it, it's been all over the world. I would say it's been used on various sayings, and it's been kind of lifted to memes to express protect the environment, save indigenous children, and so on. A lot of people were taking that and used it, but also it was stolen. Somebody stole that identity and said that that picture was their grandson. This person, this, as we call, pretendian, this fraud. He took that picture and went around and said that this is my grandson and he's going to lead the tribe someday, and you should give me some money and help us out. And he was doing all these presentations throughout Canada, and the native circle is very small. And as I said, I've been traveling. I'm well traveled, as it was. So a lot of people know me, and there would happen to be somebody in the audience who knew who I was, and they filmed, they videoed his presentation, and it's like, wait a minute, it looks like Larry's son there. And so the word got back to me, and then pretty soon his story began to unravel, and he got busted. And I mean, this was after he had fleeced people out of a lot of money, and and so it was quite an unraveling for him, as it were. And so we had contacted the filmmaker, as we had stayed friends with her for all these years, and we said we need to do a story about indigenous appropriation and ethnic fraud and so on. And so we created that full-length feature film documentary that kind of centers around that, but also the story of him growing up, much like I did, in an urban environment here in Massachusetts, and sharing his story, and a father and son story. And that and so we did a screening of that, a couple screenings, and the full release is going to be next year on that. And so we're really excited about that documentary, in order to not only tell our story, but to use that as educational tools for Native and non-Native alike. And so that circles us back to this this book here, which I want to talk about a little bit in our next 10-15 minutes or so. And so and actually I think right now we could show that second video. This explains a little bit of the book.
The Mourning Road to Thanksgiving is the story of a 40-year-old Native American man who has been tormented by his childhood nightmares. But he's also furious about everything that's happened to Native American people. I mean, everything, since the landing of the Mayflower. So he decides he's going to set off on this journey to heal himself and Native American people everywhere by abolishing America's beloved Thanksgiving. And this is a daring, heart-wrenching, but sometimes humorous journey that goes far beyond a litany of hardship and loss. And it really does reveal the healing spirit within all of mankind. Nimpa Stone Turtle is the main character. And Nimpa, his name actually means thunder. And he's literally like thunder across the book, He's this powerful figure that's, he's angry, he's got this plan, he's got all these ideas about how he's gonna make everything right with Indian people all across the land. We learn a lot about what Indian people see within themselves, the diversity amongst Native American people, about race, about identity, who is an Indian, who's not an Indian, what is a tribe. And Nepa really shows you that on this journey. He's literally the embodiment of the pain and struggle of Native American people across this land. But he doesn't stop there. He shows you that, but then he takes you to that beautiful place of what forgiveness can do, what opening up your heart can do. And in the end, he shows it beautifully. The Mourning Road to Thanksgiving, it's so significant, it's so important, because it transcends race, it transcends culture. It's really a teaching guide how to be a human being. So I'm really excited to know that it's being used in high schools, universities across the United States as a powerful teaching guide to show diversity, Native history, and also learning a lot more about Thanksgiving that people just aren't being taught. So I'm really excited about that, to get this in the schools, because this is the place where it starts, right? You know, education, teaching our young ones about the way we can connect in a better way than we connected in the past with each other across all races, you know? And that's the thing I really want to get across to people, is that this is a universal story of healing. And but it just so happens you get to learn a lot about Indian people, Native American people. This book, The Mourning Road to Thanksgiving, is a reflection of my 20 years of learning, teaching, and sharing, and spending a lot of time with the elders across Turtle Island. And the biggest gift I could have is to have their voice, tears, and joy being heard once again across Turtle Island. And that's what this book does.
Hit the bottomish. Thank you. So as you see, that's the first edition there. The book is now in its third edition, which I'm excited to say. This is the new cover. It's been, you know, quite many different venues have used this book, as I said. And so it's a novel that shares a lot of the story that was mentioned there in the video. And one of the most important things I wanted to do is that when I showed you that chart about the myth of America versus the shared and lived experience, we know, I know from experience as an educator, there are many people, many people, and some who are wannabe allies, they have a very difficult time embracing that history, right? And we know that, you know, you can get in shouting matches with people about, you know, reparations and so on, because and we really never get anywhere in that sense. And it's really jarring. And in some, you know, we talk about generational trauma of Indigenous and Black and Brown, but there's also a trauma, we believe, that scientists are now studying about colonial settlers who are the descendants of these people who committed these acts, right? So it's a lot to live with. It's a lot to take on, to realize that your ancestors participated in such acts, right? And so what do they do with that? They deny it, or they don't want to talk about it. And so I've spent a lot of my work in my writings as, you know, called, you know, incidental learning, incidental experiences. And so my writing wraps the stories within that. So you're getting humor, you're getting a storyline, and you're getting creative narratives that allow you to take it in doses, right? And so you're learning all these things while you're reading a story. And so it's not, you're not getting hit with this academic book, this history book where you're getting dates of massacres and dates of removals. And it's really, it gets quite boring to people, right? Because nobody wants to look at that, because these are real people that they happen to. And that's what I did with The Mourning Road to Thanksgiving. And I'm going to read a little bit, and then we're going to go to some questions. But you know, I think about growing up here in Massachusetts myself, or sitting in a classroom where they're saying the Indians are all gone. You know, Massasoit greeted the Pilgrims, and then we disappear, and suddenly there's Geronimo and Sitting Bull, and somehow in between those couple hundred years, the Indians have vanished into obscurity, right? And they're just gone, and nobody asks where they went, or are they still here? And so to kind of dismantle that, it was important to set the stage of telling that story. And so the book opens up with a historical background. because the education system itself has failed in telling the story of the local tribes right here, Nipmuc, Wampanoag, Narragansett, Pequot, Mohegan. We're all still here. And so, which is kind of funny when you're sitting in class and you're being told that they're not. And so it's been a disservice to our children and to educators who are not able to have access to this curriculum to teach it properly. So I did a lot of my work doing it. So what I want to read is just a little bit of the opening of the historical background, and then I can go into some Q&A. So the opening goes like this. In the beginning of all things, they say we Nipmuc started out as sky beings, without form, living with Manitou in the vast darkness. And out of the darkness, Manitou fashioned Mishitonopasog, the great turtle, as a symbol of his wisdom, patience, and old age. From the sweat of Manitou's hands, he formed an enormous ball of water to be the home of Mishitonopasog. And in the water, he made all sorts of life, some for the turtle to feed on. As Mishitonopasog became larger, her back rose above the surface. And as it rose, she brought up on her back the sands and stones from the bottom. This created the first island, our home, Turtle Island. This excerpt from a Nipmuc creation story illustrates Native American existence in North America thousands of years, even before the Europeans knew they were there. Archaeological evidence across the continent, some dating back over 20,000 years, confirms this. The Nipmucs are the original people of Worcester County, much of central New England and beyond, stretching from southern New Hampshire, Springfield, Massachusetts, down to northern Connecticut and northern Rhode Island. They lived in dome-style homes called weetos, and are also larger style structures called a longhouse, not teepees. The people lived in over 30 villages throughout the area, such as Wabaquasit, Quinnebog, Quabog, Hassanamisco, Wachusett, and so on. Their economic and subsistence cycles consisted of hunting, gathering, planting, harvesting, and the season's trade. These villages were linked together by kinship ties, alliances, and common enemies. They were amongst the various Algonquin-speaking tribes of New England that shared in a vast network of cultural exchange and trade that spanned for hundreds of miles in every direction. Over 600 years before the Mayflower landed in Plymouth Harbor, the Norse Icelandic Norwegian explorer Leif Erikson had already visited the Indians of New England. By the 1500s, there were also the Portuguese Gaspar Miguel Corte Real, Esteban Gomez of Spain, the Italian adventurer Giovanni de Verenzio, and many others, long before the Pilgrims. In 1604, Samuel de Champlain would also make his voyage through New England. Many of the explorers had come to take part in the lucrative fur trade, timber trade, seek treasures, and take natives as captives and sell them into slavery. What many people don't realize, the indigenous people were the first slaves here, unfortunately, first to be enslaved. However, for the most part, none of them intended to stay. But what they did leave behind were diseases like smallpox, measles, tuberculosis, syphilis, and many others. These illnesses were unknown, whereby the people had no immunity. Indians died horrible deaths by the thousands. Upwards of 80% of the population had been wiped out due to these epidemics. For centuries, the tribes of New England functioned in a balance of power, reciprocity that sustained an amicable way of life. This was not only practical, but also in accord with the intrinsic relationship to the land all around them. Never take more than you need, and if anything is removed from nature, it must be replaced in kind. If things did not seem to fall out of balance, as an indication of a sudden loss of shortage of food, ceremonies would be held to bring back harmony, such as a giveaway. Rituals would take place amongst family and friends. This ceremony could be used for many occasions, but its purpose was to restore stability within a person of the entire community, such as the Strawberry Moon ceremony. Massasoit was Grand Chief of the Pokanoket tribe in the early 1600s. His main homeland was located near Bristol, Rhode Island. However, he held great authority that stretched throughout the region. By the time of the Pilgrims landed in 1620, the Indians of New England had already suffered at least 2 waves of devastating blights. The sudden and massive deaths led to not only a chaotic imbalance, but also a doubt of future existence as a people. Massasoit's leadership had been weakened, and other chiefs throughout the area stood to challenge his authority. When the 102 weak and weary passengers aboard the Mayflower landed in 1620, they were in dire condition. What the Indians found out about these people is, unlike the other European explorers, that these folks planned to stay. Almost half the pilgrims didn't survive that first winter. Massasoit had them under constant surveillance as he decided what to do. The pilgrims were observed stealing stores of corn, looting, and desecrating graves. His first thought was to have them destroyed, but he reconsidered given his tribe's weakened stance. He deduced that these whites could become valuable allies against other enemies that he had. On March 22, 1621, a treaty of mutual respect and protection was drawn up between the Pilgrims and the Pokanoket tribe. Massasoit and his people lent much support to the first settlers by teaching them how to farm, hunt, fish. Also, they informed the Pilgrims of other tribes and places to avoid. The so-called first Thanksgiving was nothing like we had been taught in school. Firstly, the Pilgrims did not refer to the gathering as Thanksgiving, but more of an English harvest festival. The Indians were not invited to the feast. They just showed up. One of the activities that the Pilgrims held during the celebration was to practice their musket fire, which was something very strange to the indigenous people. Massasoit overheard the shooting and thought the newfound allies were in trouble. So he came with 90 of his warriors to check the situation. Once he realized there was no danger, they caught some deer and food and just joined in the banquet. There was no sitting around the table. Most of them stood or sat near a fire. The English were also careful to keep their women and children away from the Indians. For the most part, the meal was the first segregated event on the continent. Nonetheless, this mutual arrangement was a way to seek peace. The Pequot Indians of southern Connecticut came to understand the value and leverage of taking up this trade of furs that the English were doing and caught on rapidly. The sacred important item to all tribes was wampum. It was beads carved from quahog shells used to create belts of information and sacred stories. Wampum was used as currency between the tribes and the English, but was more common and widespread use as trade for currency. Indians in this area had never had alcohol and had a low tolerance for this effect. Indians were systematically cheated out of land, furs, and wampum while under the influence of alcohol. The English wanted to put an end to the Pequot competition for furs and other goods. They also feared the tribe's growing strength and fighting warriors. Unable to get rid of them with alcohol and trinkets, they led a preemptive attack. In 1637, the English, with the aid of allied Indians, led an assault on the Pequots at Mystic Fort. They surrounded the village and set it ablaze. Hundreds of men, women, and children were burned alive. Governor Bradford of Plymouth described the event. It was a fearful sight to see them thus frying in the fire, and the streams of blood quenching the same, and the horrible was the stench and the scent thereof. But the victory was sweet, and it was a sweet sacrifice, for the Puritans gave their prayers to God, who had wrought so wonderfully us to enclose the enemies in their hands and give us so speedy a victory over a proud and insulting enemy. End quote. That's William Bradford of Mayflower, from the Mayflower. After this destruction, the English passed a law that any surviving Pequots would never be allowed to return or call themselves Pequots again. Now, here's where I'll end here. The first official day of Thanksgiving was proclaimed in 1637 by Governor Winthrop in commemoration of the massacre of the Pequots. Quote, the 12th of the 8th month was ordered to be kept the day of public thanksgiving to God for his mercies in subduing the Pequots, bringing our soldiers to safety and to the success of the destruction and the good news from Germany, end quote. And so there, folks, that is how the first Thanksgiving was proclaimed here in Massachusetts after the massacre of the Pequots. And thereafter, it was celebrated here and there. And then officially after the Civil War, where it was like romanticized, and that's a whole nother story in itself. And so that gives you the opening background of the story. And then I go into the novel itself to give you all what you saw in the video there. And so with that, I'm going to stop and open up for some questions. And thank you all for listening. And I know it was quite a lot to take in, but I thank you for your time.
So first of all, Larry, thank you for being with us. Thank you for in a brief amount of time, you have shared so much information to help us familiarize ourselves with where you are, where your people are living, and some very important history. We talked when we met the first time about how when I read the book, I really sensed the difference of talking about East Coast versus the Midwest, which is completely cool. And I think it's really important to see that perspective, right? And when I started the book, I didn't realize I was going to get to read a novel. I was really excited because the history that Larry shared with you is in the beginning. It's brief, but it's really valuable to give you that perspective. And then it goes into the story. And I would agree with you. It allows you to stay with the message and to explore it in more human rather than technical ways, right? And I think that everybody who involves themselves in any kind of diversity whatsoever, and that should be everybody because it's all around us, right? You just have to look for it. I think you're going to find comments, perspectives, activities in the Mourning Road to Thanksgiving that will cause you to say, oh, I remember such and such, or this makes me think more about an encounter that I had with a friend, with the student, with the teacher, with something I was watching on television or another book that I read perhaps. But to start out, what would you want? And maybe it's developed over time, but what would you want non-natives to learn from the Mourning Road to Thanksgiving? And what would you want natives to experience from reading this book?
Oh, thank you again, Barbara, for having me. And yeah, so what I hope non-natives learn from this book is the rich history, culture, diversity, and complexities that we have internally within our tribal communities and without. And also the effects of colonialism, the effects of appropriation, the effects of playing Indian. I think so much of that is covered in there. And I don't want to give too much of the book away for folks who haven't read it, but the story opens up in this very traumatic way where the main character is kind of having this flashback as a kid going to school here, and during Thanksgiving he has to put on the fake feather, and he's playing an Indian, and he's an Indian, and the kids are dressed up as pilgrims, and he has this encounter with the teacher where because he's told at home that feathers are sacred and they're not to be played with, and the teacher's not listening to him, and everybody's laughing at, so he really has no place to land with this idea of his identity. And so he's always the outcast, and that's all I'll share about that. But I think that was a very common experience to all of us here in the East Coast, having to dress up as an Indian and watching other kids dress up as an Indian, and we're seeing that shifting now. And so that's something I want educators to see the traumatic effect that has on an individual when you're asking them to dress up and be a caricature of the very being. And so for Native people, I wanted this to be a soft place to land and a place of reflection, because I know our people are very funny, and so I love humor, and interspersed with the tragedy and some of the sadness that you're gonna be revealed in the story. There's a lot of laughter. I mean, I like to have some really hilarious moments in the story. It's wrapped in that within the characters, and every Native person, I want when they're reading this book, you're gonna say, yeah, I know that person from the res. I know that person, because everybody in this book are people I know. The names have changed to protect the innocent, of course, but we all know these people. If you're from a tribal community, you know these people very intimately. And so I wanted this to be a fun place for us to just kind of have our private laughs, kind of like what Reservation Dogs did. If you're not a Native person, you're laughing quietly, that other people don't get the jokes. So if you'll get those jokes, the other people won't. So it was really fun to write that story. So yeah.
Thank you. Question has come in. How do I honor my Native children through the Thanksgiving holiday? I am a foster mother who will be adopting 2 Native children. I want to honor them in their culture as well as teaching my non-Native children their history.
And I've received that question before at the cultural center. We've had foster parents who have adopted Native children. And what I did was and it was incidentally with somebody from the Tohono O'odham tribe, not giving away that information, and I had some friends from that community, so I reached out to her and told her the situation, and she wasn't really happy because this goes back to how the kids were taken from their communities, and so I guess I'm thinking that to the foster parents that try to get them in contact in a very healthy way to people from that community so they can guide that process. And as I told that person, I'm not from that community. It's best to get them connected with those people. I think that's the best way to get their voice involved in that process.
Thank you. That is a very delicate situation.
Yes.
So we wish Sarah the best. That question came from Sarah. Thank you for opening your home with love to, children who needed a home.
Yes.
I know that I'll keep you in my thoughts and prayers, as people say, because there's a lot of delicate issues there.
Yes.
So you said, of course, as you write this book, you can identify the characters as people that maybe you've seen before in your life. Is there somebody in the book that you really relate to well, or you really enjoyed writing about more than others?
I think I love them all. They're all so unique, and the book took about 4 years to write. And folks says how you did, and I said I don't know. It just the characters wrote themselves, if you want to even call them that. I really really enjoyed that. I mean, every one of them. Like for example, Nimpa, the main character, he's kind of this militant kind of Indian that he just eats and breathes his culture and tribe, and he's got his braids and then his sister, who's a nurse, she's more urbanized and she's kind of the opposite of him. She knows she's tribal, but she kind of accepts Thanksgiving and she wants to celebrate it and kind of blend in, and so you see the clash between them two. And then there's his cousin Wavy, who's this like pot-headed, happy-go-lucky kid, but he's hiding so much pain behind getting high, behind his laughter. And then there's Nipa's sister's, his brother-in-law, George. He's also a Nipmunk, but he's very fair-skinned. He's very, quote, white-looking. And he struggles with his identity, and he clashes with other Nipmunks, such as the main character, Nipa. Nipa sometimes tells him, you're not Nipmunk, you're not a real Indian. And so you're seeing all these different things unfold in this book around the story, around this Thanksgiving holiday. And that's why I think I love each character, because they all have a unique story and journey that they're taking simultaneously through the book. And you see it all come together. And then there's like the uncle, and living in the trailer, selling the cigarettes. And I really love them all. They all have these unique perspectives, and they're all bringing so much to the story that without them, you don't really have that story, so it was really, really fun.
Yeah. It's a great book to read. And I will say, it can be used in a valuable way by so many different people. Like you might say, well, I don't have room in my curriculum to read an entire book, but you can be pulling out pieces of this and make it fit into many of your classes. But we have another question, and this comes from Lauren. How can non-Native individuals be helpful in spreading the true history to other non-natives?
That's a great question. And we always say to allies, work with your local tribes and leverage your privilege, leverage whatever you have access to. Use your superpowers to help tribal peoples to get the things that they need. Like going to a community and say not what you want to do, but ask them what they need. What are the needs within their community? I think that's always important. Um, Uplifting indigenous artists, writers, filmmakers, poets, and so on. Um, as I mentioned earlier, we're living in a very challenging time in terms of appropriation, uh, folks taking up space who are not from a tribe, and it's really, and again, this is a complex as well because uh we're seeing it now with the big Buffy thing. People are kind of being torn apart on the issues, but so it's very important that we are uplifting, and so that's probably a very important thing I'll underscore it with, is that you're reaching out and supporting the right people. And when I say right people, that that they're legitimately from a tribe, that they're legitimately supported, that they're claimed by the community, and the community is working with them and things like that. So yeah.
And I'm going to take an opportunity right now to share with our audience that at Metropolitan Community College, for several years, there were opportunities for students to leave the classroom and travel for a short time with two faculty to learn to gain credit through educational experiences, right? So you would be taking classes that you would need for your degrees, and this travel experience would have components that we believe actually make your learning deeper and stronger. And we saw that with a lot of our students. So what I'm wanting to tell you, and this is based on Lauren's question too, is that was shut down for a little bit due to the pandemic, and it's opening up in the summer of 2024, and it will be limited to travel only within the continental US. But there is a program that will be at the focusing on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. We have a very excellent leader who proposed this many years ago. He is Sichangu Lakota, from his family's from the Rosebud area, very distinguished educator. He does a lot of the same things that Larry's talking about in his culture center. So I'm thinking, I got to get these two guys together, right?
Oh, yes.
Anyway, that would give you the opportunity to really explore some of that. Like, what can I do as a non-native? First of all, I want to learn from somebody, and it would be a very safe environment to do so. So if you are with your faculty member and you want to know how to get a hold of me about that, we could start talking to you about it. All the details are not in order, but they will be very soon, and it's time to start planning for next summer. So
And it's something important I want to say too, because I always get the question about well, do you all celebrate Thanksgiving? And I think it's important to note that I think Indigenous people, we all had various celebrations, and here specifically on the East, we had what we call moon ceremonies. And so we have 13 actually, and I joke with them when I'm talking to the little kids, is that if you were a Nipmuc, you get to have a holiday every month, 13 of them. So so the month of Thanksgiving, as it's called, that's harvest moon. So we would have ceremonies, feasts, and all that. And so that's what our equivalent to that would have been, harvest moon. And so that's what we celebrate, and that's what we call it. And so we are gathering, we're feasting, giving thanks. So yeah.
excellent. All right. Well, I would like to say thank you. We are getting close to our time. We're about to end. So at this point, Larry, do you have a final message you'd like to share with the audience that came today and with those who'll be watching and listening to the recording?
I just want to say I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to share with you all. And if you probably noticed, there's so much on my mind I want to share with everyone, and learn more about everybody who's in the group, and hear the different tribal stories from Nebraska. So I encourage folks, please go to okiteo.org to learn more about our organization, what we're doing, and contact us if you want to get involved, or how I can get involved with tribal folks in that area. You know, I was very fortunate enough to have, I lived in Treaty 4 up in Fort Capel for a little while with the Soto Cree. So it was very different from the East Coast, but I was able to learn a lot from living within that community there. Very learning time, I would say. I learned quite a bit there. I just want to continue that kind of growth and exchange in a very, very good way. So I thank you all for sharing this time with me and wish everybody well on their travels and during this season, whatever you may celebrate. I wish you all well and your families many blessings. So Kutabatamish.
Thank you so much.